So in today's video, I'm talking about understanding emotional dependency in codependent relationships. So in this video, you're going to learn what emotional dependency is, if you have it, and what you can do to decrease that emotional dependency so that you can create healthier relationships. But first, if you're new, my name's Michelle Ferris. I'm a psychotherapist, and I love helping people create relationships that work. So an emotional dependency is basically where you put all of your emotional eggs in one person's basket. All your needs for love, support, validation, affirmation get centered around your relationships because you don't know how to give that love and nurturing to yourself. Relationships become addictions, something you have to have in order to feel whole. And the reason this happens is because in childhood, you probably didn't get the love or attention you needed in order to feel secure and develop into a whole person. Instead, what happens is that there's an emptiness, there's a pit in your stomach, and you learn to fill that void with other people and your relationships and getting the love you never got growing up, which is a setup for toxic relationships. Because when you don't have enough love and attention growing up, you will settle for crumbs. So when somebody even gives you a little bit of attention, you glob on because you're so starved for that love and attention that you didn't get growing up. And that's why emotional dependencies are so hard to break. If you've ever had an emotional dependency, say me too in the comments. This video is going to help. Emotional dependency also happens when we have low self-esteem, where you feel like you're not enough no matter what you do, which of course relates back to childhood. So you fill that void with another person. Sometimes we go from relationship to relationship without any break in between because we just can't handle being alone. I know a lot of people do that in their romantic relationships, but some of us do it with friendships where we just can't be alone because that emptiness is too painful. And that emotional dependency that we have on others becomes the band-aid for that pain. This also creates an almost desperate need for somebody else to approve of you. So it's almost like you can't live without that other person. And this is why when we have unhealthy dependencies, we can't let go. We stay in toxic relationships far too long because we'd rather stay in a toxic relationship than be alone. Another reason we have emotional dependencies is that our relationship picker is broken. I can't tell you how many people have said, I will pick the alcoholic in the room, or I will pick the narcissist over everybody else and not realize I'm doing it. That's because we pick people who tend to feel familiar. And even though they might not at first glance look like they resemble a family member, emotionally they probably do. Because when we get into toxic relationships, we recreate our childhood. So here's what happens. When we first meet somebody, there's a honeymoon period. Even in a friendship, it usually lasts from a few months to even maybe a year or two where everything is going well. You feel totally in sync with this person and everything feels like a good match. And what we do is we assume that's who the person really is. But you can't really know somebody in a few months or a few weeks. It actually takes years to really know a person's character. But when you have a broken relationship picker, you assume that the person is trustworthy even when you don't know them yet. And that's what makes it dangerous. And that's why you end up developing unhealthy dependencies, because you think that person is your lifeline or that person is going to make you happy and make all your troubles disappear. And in fact, when we have that unhealthy dependency in our relationship, it ends up becoming toxic down the road. This also sets us up to chase people. I've done this many times in my life where if I really feel connected to somebody, I will chase them. I will send them too many texts, too many calls because I want to stay connected. The problem is that is a huge sign of an emotional dependency, because if I'm reaching out several times a day or even several times a week, it's probably not appropriate because most people who are healthy don't need that amount of contact. And that's a real telltale sign of a codependent relationship where you feel like you need a lot more consistent contact than the other person. If this is you, say me too in the comments, you're not alone. So what does emotional dependency look like in codependent relationships? It basically looks like you are making that other person your higher power. You are seeking somebody out to be your everything. You complete me is the mantra when we have unhealthy dependencies, because we think our happiness and our worth is tied up in being with that other person. And you may not even realize you have an emotional dependency until the relationship crashes and burns. For me, that happened several years ago when a friendship crashed and burned totally out of the blue, and I thought it it was a healthy friendship until she left, because it plummeted me into a major slump. I was super depressed, in massive grief for about a year. And that's what made me realize, oh my God, I've made somebody else my higher power yet again in my recovery. Even though I had been doing this work for several years, sometimes we don't realize how dependent we are until the relationship ends. So one thing I want to address before we get to how to decrease this dependency is, here are some factors that tell you you're at risk for developing an emotional dependency. One is, you're getting your self-worth from your relationships. Number 2, you're looking to other people for your answers because you can't give them to yourself. And number 3, you depend on other people to make you happy because you can't make yourself happy and you can't be alone. Those are some real telltale signs that are going to set you up for having emotional dependency in your relationships. So how do you decrease this dependency? The first step is you have to acknowledge that it exists. So many times in my recovery, I wanted to ignore that. I just wanted to get a new friend, because in my codependency, I tended to look for friends to fill that void, not necessarily romantic relationships. But I had to hit a pretty big bottom. And that's true of any addiction. And to me, codependency is just like a relationship addiction, where that unhealthy dependency drives us, because we can't live without that other person. In acknowledging that, yes, you do have an emotional dependency, that's the first step, because so much of the time we resist that. Because the one thing about recovery is that we have to be willing to recognize that we are the ones that need to change, not going out and getting another friend or another boyfriend or another girlfriend. It really has to do with changing this pattern within ourselves. And I talk a lot about this in my Healing Codependency course, because so much of codependency recovery is learning to shift that focus from other people back onto yourself. Because no single person, place, or thing should define your worth. That's probably a great mantra in my recovery, because the minute I look outside of myself for my happiness, I'm into my codependency again, and I don't want that for you. The other realization I had when that friendship ended was that unless I built a solid sense of self, I was always going to be addicted to certain people that reminded me of family. So the next step in decreasing your emotional dependency is to build a relationship with yourself. Start spending time with yourself, get to know yourself, have a date night with yourself, go to dinner, go to a movie. Start cultivating a connection with yourself where you can actually learn to enjoy your own company. Because that was my saving grace. That is what prevented me from going out and getting another friend and doing the same dysfunctional dance over and over again. Because if you can have a solid sense of yourself, whole and complete, you're going to be able to enjoy a relationship but not need them to make you happy or whole. So the third thing you need to do in order to decrease your emotional dependency on others is you need to grieve the losses. This is the work that most people don't want to do. But when we start detaching more and looking at our emotional dependencies, we have to grieve that some of our relationships are not going to last. They're too toxic, they're too enmeshed, and we have to be willing at some point to let them go. Or at the very least, start practicing healthy boundaries and detachment. This was also a crucial step when I had that friendship end, because I had to spend a couple of years in heavy-duty grief. Because I wasn't just grieving the friend, I was also grieving the love I didn't get during my childhood. And that was a really important connection, because there's reasons why you get emotionally dependent on other people. But it takes time and it takes a lot of courage. And honestly, it was something I avoided for many, many years until somebody finally said, I'm done. And I had no choice but to feel the grief. But on the other side of that grief is a sense of being whole within yourself. And that's what I want for you. Because when the pain becomes greater than the fear, you will let go and you will be willing to do something different, because that's when your recovery really begins. The next thing you need to do to decrease emotional dependencies is start creating the life you want without looking at your relationships. Start a hobby. Do things you've always wanted to do. Don't wait to be in a relationship to take that trip or to have that new experience. One of the things I did several years ago was that I started to go to film festivals because I always wanted to meet movie stars. And I never thought I could have that. And I started going. I went to Sundance Film Festival. I went to Toronto several times. And it was so healing for me because I realized that I could make my dreams come true. I could do something to make myself happy without needing a partner or a friend to do that. And that was really a pivotal point in my recovery. Because if you can create a type of life without trying to get somebody to be with you, that is a huge sign of codependency recovery. So I want you to make a quick list. What are some of those dreams, activities that you've always wanted to do that you've never let yourself do because you wanted to do them with someone else, or you wanted to wait until you had a best friend? Because I'm going to encourage you to consider doing them now, even if you're just taking baby steps, because that's how you start to build the life you want, by writing down what those things are that make you happy and start doing them. So your next step is go watch my video on how to build self-trust, because that's also part of the process. Thanks so much.